community through contact, not only baffle research, but also escapes detection rather. For the communication of thoughts, New York is nearer to Lagos today than Lagos was to Ibadan some 20 years ago. Whilst the daily occurrences in such remote places as Japan and Australia are discussed with accuracy and ease, the following money in West Africa, simply because the world is linked together by thoughts and distances have been annihilated. When in the fullness of time, the natives of the northern provinces, in spite of Sir Frederick's preventative policy, shall taste of the fruit of the tree of knowledge, and as the wisdom of serpent have represented, they shall be as gods knowing good and evil, sicut de scientes bona et mala. I don't know what that means, so don't ask me. When the bogey or fetish of white prestige shall, with increased knowledge among the masses, die a natural death, then shall it be a sorry day for Sir Frederick's repressive policy. And the very evil which he has long dreaded shall be reduced to political certainty by those very methods which he had advised for his prevention. Let us hope that in the interim, wiser and more liberal policies shall intervene to prevent the occurrence of such a large catastrophe as the volcanic eruption of a jihad or holy war in the northern provinces. In the light of the foregoing, it was quite natural that Sir Frederick's policy should meet with such lamentable and disastrous failure in the colony and southern provinces. For through liberal and sympathetic policy of previous administrations, the darkness of ignorance had been dispelled by the erection of secondary schools as centers for the dissemination of knowledge, and their wonderful product, the educated native, had been evolved in the normal course of events as the the repository of the liberal and national aspirations of the people, and the doughty champion of rights, liberty, and justice. Through his mighty exertion, the native press, that struggling institution in West Africa, was called into existence as the vehicle of thought for giving articulate expression to the sentiments of the people and for ventilating their grievances under the crown colony system of government. 1 second, brethren. There is a bit of adjustment that needed to be done on the screen for my TikTok viewers. And that is done. And if you are watching this, listen, don't mind yourself about, the supposed crowd. It's not much, okay? But if you have, by any chances, stumbled on this, do something and share it, all right? Share it and then I'll move on, okay? Let's continue. The God of the Negroes. True to his disposition, Sir Frederick loved the educated native and lived in constant dread of the native press, which at every turn foreshadowed his sinister movements. And he seemed to be blinded and confused by the intense glare of his searchlight criticism, invariably supported by logic which equally pitiless and irrefragable. The contest between Sir Frederick, the educated native, and the native press over his manifold administrative schemes were intellectual contests, pure and simple. And in every such encounter, the honors remained with the educated native and the native press. For Sir Frederick was hopelessly out of date, and it was quite easy to knock the bottom out of any political or administrative scheme deriving a solitary sanction from the dictum of my will is my law. and the autocratic power conferred by the indiscretion of a Secretary of State for the colonies. Again, the bogey of white prestige had been given a decent burial ever since the early days of the old colony and protectorate of Lagos, and any latent or induced fear of the white man was confined only to babes and sucklings. To crown it all, the people had for over 60 years been reared under the traditional principles of British justice and fair play, and had been living as respectable members of a decent and well-ordered community with all the external locations and paraphernalia of modern progress. The wealth, intelligence, and social independence of the educated natives galled Sir Frederick to the very bone. The very atmosphere proved uncongenial to his autocratic bearings and the flight of his orientation or oriental imagination. To descend from the intoxicating hair of a demigod in the northern provinces to the level of the first member in the community in the colony and southern provinces was more than enough for Sir Frederick's kidney, and he therefore determined upon a drastic change of affairs. In order to wreak his vengeance upon the educated native, Sir Frederick began to set back the hand of the clock of progress by lowering the standard of education in the colony. King's College, which was founded by Sir Walter Egerton, with the ambitious intention of preparing his students for complete graduation in London University, degenerated into a secondary school of the old regime. So deplorable was the state of affairs that many capable teachers of the old regime threw up their appointments in the assisted schools and started private schools of their own, merely for the purpose of maintaining the efficiency of the old regime. Next, Sir Frederick introduced his revolutionary changes in the judicial system, which has been bitterly criticized on all sides. And with the provincial court ordinance, the criminal code, and the newspaper ordinance, he attempted to break the backs of the educated natives and muzzle up the natives' press. But the educated natives, fighting for their very existence in defense of their sacred rights and privileges, and in defense of their country and people, cheerfully entered the list against Sir Frederick. Being adepts in organized publicity, they brought home to the conscience of the British nation the dangers that would arise out of successful prosecution of Sir Frederick's policy, since it would entail not only the social and economic enslavement of the natives, but also the legal swindling and confiscation of their inherent and inalienable right to their ancestral lands. Such gross injustice and un-British principles could have but one natural result, and that is the gradual winning away of the hearts and affections of the natives from the folds of the British Empire. The conscience of the British nation, always alive to its vital interests, caught up the plaintive cry of the educated natives and looked with great disfavor upon Sir Frederick's reactionary schemes. Sir Frederick has indeed performed a miraculous achievement, for within the short space of 4 years, he has transformed the proverbial loyalty of a liberty-loving people into a hotbed of disaffection, and has been responsible for more massacres and riots than those of previous administrations. Today, on the chessboard of imperial politics, the question of questions with all loyal natives is whether Great Britain is definitely pledged to the maintenance of our former humanitarian and sympathetic policy in West Africa, or whether our future policy is to derive its sanctions from the Nigerian system. If the former, she can, to her heart's content, count upon the well-tried loyalty of her African subjects. Or if the latter, then the natives will be compelled to claim the right of self-determination before the League of Nations. That is the end of the writing publication in the native press of Egba land, celebrating the supposed removal or retirement of Lugard. Now the reading continues. Lugard's recall in 1919 was an admission that the attempt to fuse the two Nigerias into one by imposing the system of governance operating in northern Nigeria on southern Nigeria had failed. The combined forces of the Egba and Owu rebels and the Lagos press had forced him out. His replacement as Governor General of Nigeria, Sir Hugh Clifford, set about introducing reforms to repair Lugard's vandalism in the South. Clifford was a colonial administrator in the progressive mode that southern Nigeria had been accustomed to. Though the son of a general in the British Army, he had found his way more civilian and so elected for a career in the civil service. A gifted writer, he had served as colonial secretary in Trinidad and as a governor in Malaya and Ghana before being moved to Nigeria to replace Lugard. As much as he scorned Lugard's attempt to extend feudalism to southern Nigeria, he was equally forthright in his criticism of some of the more grandiose ideas of a Nigeria united under the rule of the South, held by some of the educated natives. It can only be described as farcical to suppose that Nigeria can be represented by a handful of gentlemen drawn from a half-dozen coast tribes, men born and bred in British-administered towns situated on the seashore, who in the safety of British protection have peacefully pursued their studies under British teachers in British schools in order to enable them to become ministers of the Christian religion or learned in the laws of England, whose eyes are fixed not upon African native history or traditional policy, nor upon their own tribal obligations and the duty to their natural rulers, which immemorial custom should impose upon them, but upon political theories evolved by Europeans to fit a wholly different set of circumstances, arising out of a wholly different environment for the government of peoples who have arrived at a wholly different stage of civilization. The compromise position was a return to separate policies of administration for North and South. The constitution which he introduced in 1922, whilst retaining rule by proclamation of the Governor General for Northern Nigeria, restored in Southern Nigeria the green shoots of democracy, which Lugard had dug up by reinstating the Legislative Council and by going further, to provide for electoral seats for the first time in Lagos and Calabar. Of the 46 members of the new Legislative Council, 19 were to be unofficial members, of whom 10 would be Nigerians, with 4 of these being elected members. Lagos having 3 elected seats and Calabar having 1 electoral seat. It was on the back of the Clifford Constitution of 1922 that party politics began in southern Nigeria. In 1923, Abat Macaulay, the grandson of Bishop Ajayi Crowther, founded the first political party in Nigeria, the Nigerian National Democratic Party, NNDP, at the age of 60. His father being the founder and the first principal of the prestigious CMS Grammar School in Lagos. He had obtained a degree in land surveying and civil engineering in Plymouth in 1893. Macaulay's NNDP, with its youth wing, the Nigerian Young Democrats, and its newspaper, the Lagos Daily News, dominated Lagos politics up until shortly before the Second World War. The Lagos Daily News, of which Abat Macaulay was proprietor and editor at the time, was an inflammatory sheet, ultra-radical, intensely nationalistic, virulently and implacably anti-white. Africans who were friendly with white men or who went to the length of dining and wining with them were denounced as imperialist agents and branded as having sold Nigeria for their personal gains and advancements. The women uprising going forward. Although titled the Lagos Daily News, Macaulay's publication was concerned with national issues. One such issue, which it gave extensive coverage, was the brutal murder of protesting women in eastern Nigeria in 1929 by colonial forces. As with the Abeokuta uprising, it was the attempt to introduce the northern system of direct taxation that triggered the revolt. Eastern Nigeria was the last frontier for the British administration in the attempt to introduce direct taxation into southern Nigeria. The need to force the pace was driven by two factors. The first was the desire to ensure that the eastern provinces shared the tax burden with the rest of the country. The second was the onset of the Great Depression in 1929. In the north, and to a lesser extent in the Yoruba country, the imposition of direct taxation had been facilitated by the power and authority of the traditional rulers, who the colonial office found itself having to introduce a system of indirect rule by creating chiefs by colonial office warrants. Getting these warrant chiefs to collect taxes at a time brought the colonial authorities into direct conflict with the women of eastern Nigeria. The initiative was driven by the new governor, Graham Thompson, who succeeded Hugh Clifford on 13th November 1925, a graduate of New College, Oxford. Thompson had started his career as a civil servant in the Admiralty, where he rose to become the Director of Shipping for the Ministry of Shipping and Admiralty in 1917. He joined the colonial service after the First World War and served as Chief Secretary for Ceylon in 1919 and had been governor of British Guiana since 1922 prior to his arrival in Nigeria. The crisis began with a confrontation in November 1929 between a local man, Mark Emerua, and a local woman, Nwanye Wura. Did I pronounce that right? Nwanye Wura. That's the name, Nwanye Wura. Both natives of Oloko area in Bender Division. Emerua, while conducting a count of women, children, and livestock in the area on the authority of the warrant chiefs, on the authority of the warrant chief, ran into insolent defiance from Nwanye Wura. When the encounter turned physical, the women of Oloko rallied. Palm fronds and leafy branches in each hand, wrappers tightly wrapped chest high, and some with naked breasts in full glare. The women sang chants of woe and distressed alarm. The emotions were strong wherever the threat on Nwanye Wura's life was recounted from women to woman. The women's dance, Nwa Obiala, was a dance of defiance, performed with contempt, an act of rebellion when it was called for. Many women, young and old, knew that there was cause for concern. As Nwanye Wura's story circulated, a message gradually emerged. All women of the province were summoned to a palaver, a meeting on the imminent women's tax if it was not resisted, it would lead to their collective penury. The women next proceeded to sit on the warrant sheaf himself by effectively camping en masse outside his residence, demanding his removal and trial. The colonial government first sought to contain the protest by acceding to the women's demands. In this, it misjudged the power of the market women's network. In short order, the action had spread to other eastern provinces, and the cause had broadened to rejection of the white man's presence in their land. They will go to Owerinta to demolish native courts, that they did not want the native court to hear cases any longer, and that all white men should return to their country so that the land in this area might remain as it was many years ago before the advent of the white man. Our grievances are that the land is changed. We are all dying. It is a long time since the chiefs and the people who know book have been oppressing us. We are telling you that we have been oppressed. The new chiefs are also receiving bribes. Since the white men came, our oil does not fetch money. Our kernels do not fetch money. If we take goats or yam to market to sell, court messengers who wear a uniform take all these things from us. By the time the protest movement reached Aba, it numbered over 10,000 women, demanding the removal of all warrant chiefs. Matters came to a deadly climax on 14 December 1929 in Abak, Calabar, when soldiers with rapid-fire machine guns were deployed against the women. The following is the platoon commander's account. They came running a few paces and then walking a few paces, in much the same way as they had attacked Abak the day before. I considered it futile to try to use words in order to disperse the mob. Judging by the situation, I considered very dangerous. The force of troops was small and in a hand-to-hand struggle with these mad women. It was possible that some sort of reverse would have been sustained and the whole country would have been up. I therefore asked Lieutenant Browning to disperse the mob with fire. When the shooting stopped, 18 women were dead in Abak, and another 31 women were killed in similar circumstances 2 days later in Opobo. Although a government inquiry predictably whitewashed the incident of slaughter of unarmed women by machine gun fire, the massacre rendered Thompson's continuance as governor untenable. And on 17th June 1931, he was replaced by Donald Cameron. Cameron had been serving as governor of Tanganyika, while Thompson had been in charge of Nigeria. But he was no stranger to Nigeria, having worked in the Nigerian civil service as Central Secretary under Lugard, the son of a sugar planter in British Guyana, who married a kindred spirit, Gertrude Giltins, the daughter of a sugar planter he was a firm believer in Lugard's ideas about indirect rule, and his appointment as governor of Nigeria marked the return of Lugard's influence. Even so, in contrast to his predecessor, Thompson, and his successor, Bodilon, his tenure as governor was relatively uneventful. The only political figure of note that he had to deal with was Abat Macaulay. Although Macaulay's dominance of Lagos politics in the 1920s and 30s is shown by how his party won all seats in Lagos elections in 1923, 1928, and 1933. His politics was very much local under the rule of the British Crown rather than challenging it. If ever there was a black English gentleman of his era, it was Abat Macaulay, always impeccably dressed in starched, spotless white suit, a black bow tie, knotted painstakingly, white buck shoes, and sporting a white Panama hat. He was the object of much adulation by the populace. One imagined that he typified the term Victorian gentleman. He certainly bore himself like one. This dandy politician, whose grave was with the British colonial administrators rather than with colonialism, marked the first phase of political activism in southern Nigeria. A second and more radical phase came with the arrival of a new generation of graduates. The formal challenging of the Guard came in 1938, by which time Macaulay was age 75, with the emergence of the Niger Youth Movement. Until 1938, nomination and the election to the 3 Lagos seats in the Legislative Council had usually been settled within the confines of Abat Macaulay's home. In the October 1938 elections, however, the youth movement, which had in the meantime established its own journal, the Daily Service, launched a vigorous campaign and defeated Macaulay's party. The Second World War, 1939 to 1945, was to change the intensity of the battle between the colonialists and the educated natives in a way that neither side could have imagined before the war's outbreak. The end of chapter 4. So what we have done is that we have done like about 70, we have done about 60 pages today. And that is the chapter 4 of A Fatherless People. The secret stories of how Nigerians missed the road to the promised land. Interesting. We will continue from that, which is going to be the chapter 5. We will continue from that tomorrow. So although I know some of you will probably want to react via phone calls and all that, but don't worry. We will do that some other time. I want to go and get ready for the evening, because I believe that tonight is going to be really, really packing. It's going to be loaded, and I don't want to be found wanting. Thank you so much for spending your afternoon with me again, and I hope you'll be back again in the evening. Thank you, and I will see you some other time. Good afternoon.
Mayegun làwa mọ̀ làmọ̀ tó dòdòdò.
Mayegun Diary, Mayegun number one.
Mayegun làwa mọ̀ làmọ̀ tó dòdòdò.
Mayegun Diary, Mayegun number one.
Mayegun ti dé o, ọ̀rẹ́ ará ìlú.
Mayegun Diary, Mayegun number one.
Lórí Facebook, lórí YouTube.
Mayegun Diary, Mayegun number one.
Gbogbo bó ṣe ń lọ ni Mayegun já wa sí.
Mayegun Diary, Mayegun number one.
Àṣírí ọ̀jẹ̀lú kì í bò níbẹ̀ o.
Mayegun Diary, Mayegun number one.
Bó bá ṣe eré, àní Mayegun máa wí.
Mayegun Diary. Máyégún Diary náà ibi number one.
ẹ farabalẹ̀ sẹ́ o kẹgbọ́rọ̀ lẹ́nu.
Máyégún Diary náà ibi number one.
àní Máyégún làwa mọ̀ tó dódòdó.
Máyégún Diary náà ibi number one.
àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Máyégún ti dé. Máyégún ti dé.
ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Máyégún ti dé.
àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Máyégún ti dé.
lórí Facebook.
Máyégún ti dé.
àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Máyégún ti dé.
lórí YouTube.
Máyégún ti dé.
àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Máyégún ti dé.
bọ́ bàbá gbé wúrẹ́.
Máyégún máa wí.
àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Máyégún ti dé.
ijó ìgbádìyẹ.
Máyégún máa wí.
àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Máyégún ti dé.
pẹ̀sìdó bá rúfin o.
Máyégún máa wí.
àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Máyégún ti dé.
kí gómìnà kówó jẹ.
Máyégún máa wí.
àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Máyégún ti dé.
ọlọ́pàá tí ń gba rìbá.
Máyégún máa wí.
àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Máyégún ti dé.
aṣòfin tí ń rúfin o.
Máyégún máa wí.
àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Máyégún ti dé.
òpùrọ́ olóṣèlú.
Máyégún máa wí.
àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Máyégún ti dé.
ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Máyégún ti dé.
àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Máyégún ti dé.
Máyégún ti dé. gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì. Máyégún ti dé. gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì. ṣùgbọ́n ní bá ti ṣe èyí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe ọmọ bá dèrò ní fi wọ́n níran o.
Máyégún ti dé. Gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì. Máyégún ti dé. Gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì. ṣùgbọ́n ní bá ti ṣe yìí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe ọmọ bá dẹ́rọ̀ òní fi wọ́n níran.
wọ́n fowó bẹ́ẹ̀ o Máyégún ó sọ pé wọ́n ò fẹ́ bẹ́ẹ̀. wọ́n fowó bẹ́ẹ̀ Máyégún ó sọ pé wọ́n ò fẹ́ bẹ́ẹ̀. oníkanṣá ti ṣe èyí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe fáwọn ará ìlú tó gbé wọn débẹ̀ o.
Máyégún ti dé gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì. Máyégún ti dé gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì. ṣùgbọ́n ní bá ti ṣe yìí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe ọmọ bá dẹ́rọ̀ òní fi wọ́n níran.
kì máa yí ṣe eré ọ̀rọ̀ yìí kì í ṣe ẹ̀fẹ̀. kì máa yí ṣe eré ọ̀rọ̀ yìí kì í ṣe ẹ̀fẹ̀. ẹni bá ti lè lẹ́bọ̀ lẹ́rù o ọmọ bá dèrò kàṣàyè tú wọn síta.
Máyégún ti dé gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì. Máyégún ti dé gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì. ṣùgbọ́n ní bá ti ṣe yìí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe ọmọ bá dẹ́rọ̀ òní fi wọ́n níran.
tẹnitẹni ọmọ Máyégún ọ̀rẹ́ ara ìlú mọ̀mọ́ ni.